The idea of getting off the beaten track, literally and figuratively, sounds deeply appealing. The great outdoors, off-grid retreats, and the sense of adventure. But I suspect that most people who have cars decked out with the capability to go on those off-road adventures don't do much more than mount a curb with gusto. Perhaps that's due to a lack of confidence, or maybe the lack of mountains in Chelsea. Rivian owners might be an exception to that rule. GMC Hummer EVs, I'm not so sure. And of course there are a load of EV van conversions such as the ID Buzz. But all of those are thundering great big brutes ready to bulldoze whatever lays in their path. Go gently and all that jazz. So really you want a narrow, nimble mountain goat that can competently and elegantly scale a boulder and offer you a place to sleep. And I think that's precisely what we've got here with the Adventure One from Potential Motors here in Canada. And if not mountain goat, then certainly a mini benevolent transformer cameoing as a cooler box. A brief pause. If you're wondering why we're out here filming in Canada, it's because we're here ahead of our live show in Vancouver on the 8th, 9th, 10th of September. It will be a fantastic festival of clean energy and electric vehicles in partnership with BC Hydro. So get your tickets today. Let's start by looking at the exterior of this Adventure One, which in my mind is very reminiscent of a Daihatsu Hijet, only one that's got a little bit more sophisticated. Either that or, a canoe that's done some serious summer shredding. But the thing that we absolutely need to focus on first is the proportions, because they're definitely a little bit strange. It's 1.6 metres wide and 4.5 metres long, which technically puts it in the same footprint as like a BYD Atto 3 or a Nissan Ariya. But it looks a little bit strange, and that's because it's so much taller. It's about 2.2 metres tall, the ground clearance is 30 centimetres or so. And that has the effect of making it look like it's sort of sucking in, or, a bit like the night bus in Harry Potter, or that weird thing where you kind of swoop or try to squeeze out of an aisle. And that choice is very, very deliberate, because if you've got a slightly narrow track, one that's maybe more reflective of what you'd expect on a recreational vehicle, it matches the trails and pathways that you would want to go off-road on, and means that this vehicle can go places that something like a Rivian or a GMC Hummer EV absolutely wouldn't be able to go. And that's really reflective of what Potential Motors are trying to do here. They're trying to make these vehicles so that you can go further and adventure further and go to places that other vehicles can't necessarily take you. All that whilst having sort of the comforts of an RV as well. And to further make that possible, they have equipped this vehicle with a ton of super sophisticated intelligent software, all powered by their proprietary OROS, or Off-Road Operating System. And we will come on to that in just a little bit. But before we do, if you're outside of the lucky people who were fortunate enough to place a pre-order for one of these, you may not have heard of Potential Motors. So who exactly is this New Brunswick-based company?
So Potential Motors is an off-road electric vehicle technology company that builds technology to enable people to drive in challenging conditions. So our team has a ton of experience in AI, computer vision, and software development, and then in vehicle dynamics. And all of that leads into the technology that we built to apply to mining, automotive, vehicles like this in the off-road space, and then even into two-wheel vehicles like motorcycles. So this vehicle is really meant to be a demonstrator of what we see this future to look like and what we see our technology looking like in a vehicle. So this is really focused around that experience, getting it out there in one way so we can start showing this at different shows and get the Potential Motors brand out there as well, and get close to the customer, understand exactly what their problems are when they're driving in challenging terrain and off-road, so that we can build technology that's better suited for them. I see what we're building here, as being a piece to the autonomy puzzle. I think this idea of autonomy in every place all the time, we're still quite a ways off of that. I mean, we see it in Phoenix and San Francisco, kind of in located areas where autonomy is working. But if we expand that to be in all kinds of different areas, and specifically in our use case, looking at off-road terrain and cases like mining industry, or in the off-road industry where it's just completely different every time you get in the vehicle, we're still a long ways out from that. So the part that we're really solving is what is one of those fundamental parts that can help people today who are driving these vehicles, but then also fundamentally help solve that problem of autonomy in the future. And that's really using sensors to understand the types of terrain that you're driving over, pull out features from the terrain that you're driving in, and all of that is going to help people drive today in a more fun experience, we think, and then also set ourselves up to be able to help solve these autonomy problems for the wider breadth of what autonomy can be in the future.
Now it is worth noting that this is a prototype, so I'm not going to comment too much on the fit and finish, but let's take a closer look at some of the features. So first of all, let's look at this light bar, which I think it's pretty sophisticated, it's pretty elegant, it makes the front of this look pretty friendly, made only slightly more aggressive by our little fangs that we've got here at the front. Tow hook, clearly very useful if you're going to be taking this off-road and doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things. Now moving around to the side, you can see these enormous and very appropriate 30-inch tyres. You can see that they've already had quite a lot of fun in this car already, but obviously very necessary if you're going to be adventuring off-road. We've got some interesting doors, which again, we'll come on to a little bit later when we go and have a look at the interior, but big gull-wing doors, so you can imagine already that that's probably going to emerge as a lovely canopy so you can sit out and look at the environment. Lovely rugged edge so you can scrape the mud off your shoes so you don't get it into the lovely interior. You can actually store 40 litres of water on board. Very necessary if you're going to be spending a weekend camping or in a really, really remote location. But I think one of the coolest things is that it's got this inbuilt ladder. So you can imagine sitting up there, having a lovely rosé at the end of the day, or you can store your spare tyre there. And then at the back, you've got this enormous window. So imagine sitting in there, it's raining and you can look out at a beautiful vista. And actually it just looks so incredibly benevolent and friendly, which if you're marching through an environment, I think that's very important actually. We've come round to this technology demonstrator to see the OROS, or Off-Road Operating System, in action. And what that is an AI-powered vision system that can provide predictive analysis to predict the terrain in front of the vehicle. And that can be integrated into a whole host of different vehicles, from mining, from recreational vehicles, from side-by-sides, and of course, the Adventure One. And it's using a whole load of sensors, from LiDAR to stereo cameras to control algorithms to machine learning, you name it, so that it can make proactive decisions about the terrain ahead rather than reacting to that situation as it arrives at it. And it can use that predictive terrain analysis for proactive suspension, torque distribution, precisely controlling the power to each of these wheels, as well as that automatic terrain adaptation as well. Now this vehicle here, it has thrown everything at it to test all of those different things. So it's really got, everything in the kitchen sink here, including quad motors. So the Adventure One doesn't have all of this, but this is really, really stress testing the technology that you have on the Adventure One. So it still is equipped with that automatic terrain adaptation. And the overall effect of this is that you've got this kind of strategic crystal ball AI-powered vehicle that can make those really, really savvy decisions about how to drive in the terrain ahead.
So we use a couple of sensors to actually detect what's in front of the vehicle, and we look for two things. We look for the shape of the terrain, so that tells us how the vehicle is going to interact with the shape, which can help us inform control. But then we also look at visually what it looks like, and that helps us infer characteristics about the terrain, about how slippery it is or how soft it is.
And this is very much a technology demonstrator, so you've got everything that you can possibly sort of demonstrate here on this vehicle. And then I guess you can cherry pick the specific things for different vehicle types. But I'm really interested to know about the side-by-side market, and imagine that there were, a plethora of electric vehicle options. Surely this is going to take away from the driving experience.
Well, we hope not, and that's one of the real challenges about new technologies and new markets. The side-by-side market is a recreational, so it's not like getting from point A to point B, it's actually about driving. So what we're really interested in is how do you build in new technologies that make the vehicle safer, but more fun to drive, and lets the driver experience the drive more and not have to worry about fiddling with settings or changing modes.
And so when it's changing the modes, what specifically is happening from a kind of it's detected the terrain ahead, then what happens?
So that goes through our AI models. So basically there's artificial intelligence in there that helps decide what would be the best modes for the vehicles, and those modes are typically controlling the drivetrain. So classic examples are like, should I be in two-wheel drive or four-wheel drive? But it can also go on to should I be in sand mode or mud mode or hard-packed mode? And that can affect drivetrain, but it also affects suspension, so that you can either have the ride be very comfortable, or if it's hard-packed, you can do performance driving.
This is very much about assisted driving, really instilling that confidence. But you mentioned that actually you can get some serious efficiency gains as well.
Yeah, so one of the really big challenges about off-road is it introduces a whole other complexity with efficiency. So you can think about driving on-road, you're kind of always on pavement, it's nice and smooth relatively, but in the off-road the conditions are changing all the time. What happens is the wheels start to slip and they spin a lot. and of course that's wasting energy. So it takes a lot more effort to get a vehicle like these through terrain like that because they're soft. So we found that with just being pretty smart about the right modes, again, making sure you're in the right mode and actually putting the right power to the right place at the right time, you can actually save energy. And of course, moving to EV and range anxiety, that's a really big consideration for most drivers.
Right, let's talk about price, as this is not cheap at $136,000 or roughly £88,000. But it's maybe unsurprising given the limited number they're making, and you do get a lot of off-road worthiness, as alongside the predictive advanced driver assistance stuff, there are some mega approach, breakover and departure angles that surpass the Rivian and the GMC Hummer EV. And some pretty respectable other stats too, including a 70 kilowatt hour battery and 100 miles of off-road range, or 250-ish on road. Now here in Canada, fares are a genuine consideration. The Adventure One seats 4 but sleeps 2. So 2 people will have to brave the outdoors on an off-road overnight sojourn. So moving on to the interior, as we mentioned earlier, we've got this lovely gull-wing door which is doubling as this lovely canopy with a sort of panoramic roof. It has this pretty nifty pocket, so you could store your bits and bobs in there, they will stay in there and you can still open up the canopy. Now we've got 4 seats in here, 2 of which can be removed to double as camping chairs. So you could swift them out, sit under this canopy and enjoy the campsite and the lovely view. Now I did say that this is a prototype, so I won't dwell too much on the quality of the fit and finish, but immediately you can see that it's got that very lovely Scandi style that so many of these electric vehicle campervan conversions have at the moment. Now despite the fact that this is still very narrow, it's still pretty sizable in here, and actually you can take out everything inside and still fit in a full pallet, so it remains that kind of deeply practical vehicle as well. Now Potential Motors have partnered with a really interesting company called EgoE to make this fantastic kitchen. Now these are available for about £5,000, which is the same price as the Rivian kitchen set that they did have, although they have recently discontinued that. And I have to show you some bits and pieces here because it is so neat, and when you just slide it out, honestly, I cannot even begin to describe the sort of quality feel that has, much better than my own kitchen at home, has to be said. So this slides in and out as we've just seen like that, but you can actually take the whole unit out and leave it if you want to have the full interior space for storing things. There are a couple of really nice features. This is honestly the ultimate Tetris of kitchens. This is a chopping board, we'll come back to that. And then you can pop this, a little sink, like that. And then you've got a couple of attachments, so I could put a sink on there, that just pops on there. Or alternatively, I could put a full shower, again that just pops on there, and then you've got your whole choice there. So super useful for all of those outdoor activities. Axe. Despite the fact that this vehicle is pretty narrow, it doesn't feel that way once you're inside. And I think that's largely because you have such an enormous amount of glass that gives you that sort of complete, almost feels like 360-degree view. Enormous windows, enormous windscreen. And actually, because you're sat right on top of the wheel, you have a very, very clear of what's ahead of you. And actually, we've recently had a Rivian R1T, and I did find that a bit of a challenge. Being sat so far back from the front of the vehicle definitely didn't give me that same confidence to really understand where I was in space, whereas this does give you that real good perception and control. A couple of other bits and pieces. So we've got enormous buttons, which I think super helpful if you're getting in and out of this car in winter. You've got gloves on, you don't want to be fiddling, taking the gloves off, finding something on the screen. It's really useful having that complete kind of tactility and big, easy to find buttons. There is a ton of space here. It is not cramped in any way at all. I have masses of space above me. I thought I could stand in here, turned out to be sadly mistaken, but certainly the rear seats and the front seats would glide through the jack test. I think for whoever has placed a pre-order for this vehicle is going to have a fantastic time. But Potential Motors is about so much more than just this vehicle. However, what this does do is provide a really, really clear example of how advanced driver assistance technologies can equip you with the confidence and freedom to travel far and wide. And I think about my dad, who is, 66, retired, spends his time gallivanting across the UK in his campervan, sourcing the UK's best bakeries. And if he had something like this, he could continue to do that for so many more years to come without his world shrinking. And that is what mobility should be all about.